Was a time of the preacher when a story begun. Choice of a woman and the love of a man, and how he loved her so dearly. He went out of his mind. Well, she left him for someone. She left. And he cried.
And we're live. Here we are
Here we are.
in the upper room.
Week 11.
The upper room that is wonderfully air conditioned.
Majestically.
Majestically air conditioned.
Let's get that fan rolling.
You want the fan?
Yeah, let's get the fan. Sometimes it gets hot up in here.
That's right. That's because I fed him.
Oh, man.
I'm
stuffed.
He's all fat and sassy because he's fed well.
Fat, yes. Sassy, yes.
Yes. That's just a colloquialism. It doesn't mean you're neither fat nor sassy. It just, well, you're living large.
Yeah, that's what
No.
fat
So anyway,
people do. We live large. That's true.
Just pardon me.
You know, I'll share this joke too because on the same line as fat and sassy. Every once in a while I like to go to, get some fast food. And I go through the drive-through lane and, I order and I get up to the line and they always say, sorry about the wait. And I always go, is that a fat joke?
You don't do that. That's
Yes, I do. I do that.
It's so on brand for you. That's your thing. That's your thing.
Are you calling me fat?
No,
Sorry about the
no,
wait.
that you would respond
Sorry
like
about-
that is so.
It's on brand,
target.
yeah.
Yeah, it is for you. So it's been a interesting few weeks. Remains interesting in this country
Mm-hmm.
and locally. Been interesting around here. Of course, as I was saying Sunday, everybody can see Mo, the wonder dog here. We've been without air conditioning since Sunday night and finally got it repaired and running late yesterday. So we're all happy. Or we would not be doing Q&A in this room in particular. Upstairs, man. Ooh, it's hot.
Dude, it's Sunday. I was starting to feel it Sunday.
Yeah, there was ice on the condenser coil like 3 inches thick. Where the Freon had a blowout or something, you know.
Ooh.
So anyway, all that's behind us, we hope, and we don't have any further problems. Fantastic young man came and worked on it and fixed it, and his name was Lee, and he was fantastic, and I appreciate him so much. And the Queen and King Toby have been gone, for a few days, and it's just me and the jokesters left, me and Mo and Braden and his crew. So we're having a good week, and here tonight to talk about a couple things that are quite local and in Christian news as it relates to race in the United States. And there'll be some folks who'll say, oh, we're going to talk about race. Well, it's not going away.
It doesn't go away.
It's not going to go away, and shouldn't go away. But the perspective now is a little bit different. It's not about so much what each individual feels. We're sort of moving in the conversation to what is the church's role
Right.
in healing long-standing grievances and revealing the blind spots that we have. I said months ago, can you believe this? Months ago that the pandemic, people talk about, is this the apocalypse? Well, it's
If
not
only
the end.
we're so lucky.
That's right. We're not that lucky. It's not the end of the age. It's not the end of the world. But apocalypse as unveiling, apocalypse as revealing, it has proven to be exactly that. And I'm not just talking about in relations to race. It seems like everything is up for grabs, and that's a product of unseen, unbefore-seen pressures, health-wise, economically, and we're not out of it. Florida is setting new coronavirus records. by the
That's a
day.
record.
It's
That's a
crazy.
record you don't want to break.
You don't want to break that,
and we
record.
keep breaking it.
And so Florida's, especially in South Florida, things are crazy. And some other Texas, some other southern states. We talk about a second wave, but we really haven't worked through the first wave, and people lost patience. Memorial Day, and just kind of throw caution to the wind. And so we got to be careful with that. But anyway, there was I've been asked about it by several people, and Garrett and I have talked about it a couple times this week. More than a couple people have inquired if I had seen this video. And it was a video between, there were three people involved: Mr. Cathy of the Chick-fil-A chain, Louis Giglio, pastor of Passion Church in Atlanta, very prominent pastor. I met Lou, gosh, I was 21, 22, so he was in his early 30s maybe, and he was on the youth ministry circuit then. Great man. And I want to preface everything by saying that he's a good man,
Right.
with a very good heart. And he was having a discussion with Mr. Cathy about race, and of all people, who was in the room with him?
Lecrae.
Lecrae. Tell folks who are watching right now, I have no idea who Lecrae is. Who Lecrae is?
Who is Lecrae?
You don't know?
No, I do.
Oh, okay. I was defaulting to someone younger than myself.
Yeah, so Lecrae is you could call him a Christian hip hop rap artist. Now I know a lot of people are probably out there like hip hop and rap and Christian.
How does that go together? Yeah,
It's I'll say this: I saw him in concert, 2009, at least 2009, and I'm not selling it short by saying this was one of the most. The music and everything was awesome, of course, but the way he shared his music and the way he shared the gospel message at this concert was one of the most powerful events I'd gone to up to that point.
He's really a boundary breaker, not just in his genre in music, but in relation to Christian faith and race.
Right.
Because he has for years talked about equality among racial reconciliation, and he's never been, not in the recent years, apologetic about his faith, and so and
even when attacked by the mainstream.
Oh yeah,
and that's one of the most I think powerful things about him is he's remained consistent and steady in the midst of all this,
right.
Even amongst his peers. A lot of people saying you should go secular, and he's saying, and really when he became a Christian, he said that's a route I wanted to go down, and it didn't work. And then I became a Christian. God saved me, and so I went this alternate route, and he's found his calling.
Right.
And when you listen to his songs, or even if you don't like rap, just listen to a couple of his songs, and you see God working in and through him in really cool ways.
And and this needs to be said in the context of this. And if you haven't seen the video and you don't know about the controversy, good on you, But, in the social media world and beyond the social media world, in the Southern Christian world, there are fewer louder voices than Louis Giglio. And there are fewer voices with his credibility.
Right. Yeah.
He has tremendous credibility in Christian circles, and Passion Church in Atlanta is massive. I think is it Redmond that's there, or is it
Chris Tomlin?
Chris Tomlin is with him. Chris Tomlin's like the worship leader there, which is crazy to think that so much of the music we listen to today is produced by his company, but he's the actual worship leader at Passion Church. Anyway, to get to I'll get to the summary of it, and I know Garrett has video we can show if and I don't know how long they are, but essentially there's this discussion between Louis Giglio, Mr. Cathy of Chick-fil-A, and Lecrae. So you have, a CEO of a business.
And he was working on Sunday, which
Yeah, that's right.
Chick-fil-A.
Not he wasn't making chicken though. He
wasn't.
he was in there with Lou on this conversation. So Lou, this prominent pastor, Kathy, prominent Christian company CEO, and Lecrae, probably the defining Christian voice inside of hip hop. Anyway,
Right,
There
yeah.
would be no other way. And Lecrae has been very forthright in years in pursuing these kind of conversations. So he's very comfortable in this setting and incredibly insightful about his own experiences. And he always approaches it as a brother in Christ, which is he's not grinding an axe. Anyway, in the context of that conversation, Giglio misspoke, and he said later that he misspoke and apologized. I think it was heartfelt apology. That he called slavery. It even hurts to say this. He called slavery a blessing for white people because it constructed the world in which we live. And I didn't see it live, but I saw it like within an hour of the video going out. And I was just like, ow, and I was just like, can we rewind that and let's hear that again? And so he went on to say that he was trying to come up with a different way of saying white privilege, because immediately so many white Christians stop listening when that word pops up.
Yeah.
And so he used the word blessing. And if you watch the video, Lecrae is like,
He chuckles. He's like,
What?
Wait, are you serious?
Are you serious? And then Lecrae did a follow-up, which was fantastic as well. And Mr. Cathy just sort of sit there like, what is going on? And here, let me just be honest about people in my vocation, in your vocation too.
Mm-hmm.
We make a living by talking to people. We make a living by, in some ways, and I'm not exaggerating, being a spiritual authority. And I say that carefully, authority. And so what happens is we tend to think that we're experts about everything, including issues that we're really not, they're not in our depth. Now, I'm not saying that the gospel doesn't speak to racial issues. Oh, my Lord, yes, it does. I'm just saying that, like someone like me, someone like Lou, who spends your career in predominantly white churches, you got to, at some point, you have to listen and not just be the expert. And I think that he just sort of stumbled into that. Because again, he has credibility, and he's like a Christian celebrity, and celebrities live inside bubbles, and it's easy to just go blundering your way through something when your heart. I don't think his heart is malicious or wrong. I just think that it was higher than his heart. It's the thinking that really led to. It's just been a bombshell in the Christian universe, particularly in North America and in Southern culture.
And Louis Giglio's reach is vast. I mean, every year, he started this conference called the Passion Conference in the late 1990s, and over the course of 2 decades now, they host the event it started in Texas, and now it's moved to Atlanta. But they host this event. They have a live stream of it happening. So wherever you are in the world, you can see this conference happening. They bring in these big name speakers and artists, and they reach thousands, tens of thousands of college-age students every year.
They've raised millions of dollars to stop human trafficking.
Yeah, it's modern-day trafficking, sex trafficking.
Right,
I mean,
they feed the hungry. I mean, it's not like they're out of their depth in entering these type of issues.
Right.
It was a blunder. And Christians in social media have been like, oh, Lou, but try harder, do a little better, and that's good because it's been regretful but supportive. Those outside the Christian world, he is getting
absolutely
hammered because he's lifted out of. He's not lifted out of context, but people hear that one line outside the context of his whole life.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's one of the biggest dangers of social media.
Well, that's one of the biggest dangers in the 21st century.
Yeah,
sound bites. And Lecrae did not defend what he said, condemned it, but defended Lou as a person. And Lecrae's got thick skin because of the career choices he has made. And, I've said it on Sunday, and I've said it on Wednesday nights. I've said it recently at a Unity March right here in Walton County. You start trying to build bridges, though, and you get walked on both sides. And the thing that I commend Giglio for is when he realized, this is just stupid, and he owned it. And for that, listen, a mega church pastor, they're typically, and I don't know this about Lou, typically they're like CEOs. They make a lot of money. They have a lot of influence. They supervise a lot of people. They're responsible for a lot of economic development in like Passion Church in a downtown city of Atlanta. And for anyone with that kind of power and money and clout to own a mistake is very rare.
Right.
And for that, I do appreciate owning it.
Yeah. So
that's good for all of us.
So we've prefaced, a little bit of who Louis Giglio is for those of you that don't really have a bigger grasp of his reach, who he is, and also Lecrae, and we don't have to get into Dan Cathy. He makes chicken.
Everybody knows him.
Everyone in the Southeast knows who he is.
That's right.
So we have 2 video clips that we're going to show you. So we're going to show you the video of what we're talking about. I think we're going to.
Is it the short one?
It's about a minute and a half.
Oh, good.
And then the second clip is actually from Lecrae, and this clip is actually before Louis Giglio says what he says.
Right.
But what Lecrae has to say about the church's role, I think, is really. I think that's going to carry our conversation.
Yeah, because
forward.
we do want to. We're not condemning Lou Giglio. Here's
Correct,
what I
yeah.
want to say in using this as I hate this phrase, but it's true, a teachable moment for all of us.
Yeah.
Is that we are all, because of the pandemic, because of it's 2020, because a newer, younger generation is coming to the forefront of leadership in this country, this isn't going away. And the church is not skilled in this conversation. And we need to be. And, and if you're someone that says, well, I'm not interested in this conversation at all, well, I understand that. But if you're this side of 90 years old, you're going to have to live in this for the foreseeable future.
Exactly.
And it's not just about you. It's about the believers that follow us. It's about my children. It's about my grandchildren. And I'm biased. I'm going to admit my bias. I have an African American son. Everybody knows that. That's changed my perspective on. I can't even begin to talk about how that's changed my perspective. I had a conversation with Bryce. Had a conversation right before we came in with him. He was on lunch break in Hawaii, but I had a conversation with him earlier this week that I'm not quite ready to share. I was maybe I'll share it by Father's Day, Sunday, but I was really moved by something that he said in this whole racial reconciliation issue. And he's black, raised in a white family, of course, but so I'm biased, and I have a vested interest in it. and it's really close to my heart, and it has been since I picked up that kid at the hospital in my arms. But even more so in this time, and more so from the fact that he came of age now 21 as all of this is exploding.
Oh yeah.
So that's
right in the middle of something.
Yeah.
huge.
So that's my that's all my biases laid out on the table. You got a video.
Yeah, I got a video. All right.
Interesting, because I feel like on the inside of the church, we're fighting this historical context you talk about, but we don't love to sit in it and realize this is what God's asking me to do, to die to myself and to live for Him, whatever context that's going to look like for me. But I want to flip that upside down, because I think the other side of it is true with our nation's history. We understand the curse that was slavery, white people do, and we say that was bad, but we miss the blessing of slavery, that it actually built up the framework for the world that white people live in and lived in. And so a lot of people call this white privilege, and when you say those two words, it just is like a fuse goes off for a lot of white people, because they don't want somebody telling them to check their privilege. And so I know that you and I both have struggled in these days with, hey, if the phrase is the trip up, let's get over the phrase and let's get down to the heart.
Sure.
Let's get down to what then do you want to call it? And I think maybe a great thing for me is to call it white blessing, that I'm living in the blessing of the curse that happened generationally that allowed me to grow up in Atlanta. And, you know, you're talking about being 57. If you were 57, I can't imagine being that old, Dan, and being 57. But I've said to our church, Lecrae, a few weeks ago, when I was born, the day I was born on Boulevard at Georgia Baptist Hospital in 1958, black people did not have equal rights in this city. Not my grandparents' lifetime or their lifetime, in my lifetime. This is right now what we're talking about today. And call it what you want, Dan. I think the issue begins with a white person saying, I want to try to put myself in somebody else's shoes. And I find it's far easier to dismiss it all by saying, you know, that's not me, that doesn't reflect me, and I just went through diversity training at my job for the last 4 days, and so that's all we hear. That's not the way I am. But I feel like dismissing just as a response probably is an indication that there's something a little bit bigger under the surface that maybe we don't want to deal with.
So there it is. And
There it is.
And I was just looking at a few comments there of folks who you may be seeing it for the first time. And again, this is not to bash anybody. What a moment, though.
Yeah.
I mean, what a moment for all of us, especially we who are white, to say, what is it in our thinking that made it so easy to just say that, oh, well, it's been a real blessing, you know, because we have what we have because it's been built out of slavery. It's not a blessing, you know. And this isn't the only place in contemporary Christianity that this comes up. John MacArthur, who is on the West Coast and is a leading Reformed teacher in the church, has said in recent years that slavery is biblical. And sure, there were occasional abuses, but I don't know why there's such a hang-up about that. Now, he said that years ago, and I heard him say it outside the context of what we're in now, and I was just like, what? You know, what? I couldn't believe it.
And for those of us that know a little bit more about Louis' background, where he's coming from, you know, it's cringeworthy to listen to that. You know, because it's just like, does he really think that? Does he really believe that? Is that what his heart's saying?
I think he's looking for a softer word. I think he's trying to build a bridge back to the white community, but
right. Yeah, I mean, And that's where he got ripped apart by so many people from different backgrounds, different races, different religions, and people that don't know his context. For those of us that do, we go, oh, I think I know what he was trying to say, which is essentially slavery is a curse that became something strong for white people.
I really think that what's lurking there is a Bible verse that I hate be used in so many. You know where I'm going.
No, I'm just laughing. Because
Romans 8:28, all things work together for good, with this idea that everything is good. But it's not.
Exactly, yeah.
We've had this conversation about not take a knife and dig it into your heart. You've lost a child, you and Aaron. We had this exact same conversation right before you moved here, and Judah had passed, and there were these comforters, who always want to come up and say the strangest things.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's just in a better place. And,
or
God just needed another angel,
or there could have been something wrong and it's better this way,
or even
with, that sort of,
or you when she was sick, you just didn't pray enough, or maybe it was a sin that you committed that.
Oh,
and it just,
I know all those.
It's like, man, you must believe in a pretty pathetic and evil God,
right?
If that's the case, and I'm not sorry if I offended anyone saying that.
No, because that's it's criminal almost.
Right. Yeah, and
to say that to someone who's suffering. But I remember distinctly those exact conversations of the whole, all this is going to work out. This is going to be good, but it's not good. You can make meaning and sense of it at some point, but that's a whole lot different than saying this was good.
Right, and I think I think what Louis was trying to convey is just simply this idea that we've had it good because of the sin of white folk. We have it good because of what happened and what's continued to happen.
Right, and he could
use
stop,
the word blessing,
and he could stop there.
Right, and he used the word blessing, and
there.
it's like, no, blessing is something that's almost ordained by God.
Blessing is an intent. That's right.
Exactly.
Let's see what Lecrae has to say. Have you got that video?
Yeah, so to preface this video a little bit, this, like I said, this one takes place just before Louis says what he says. But this is in light of this idea of what is the church's role? What is the church supposed to do with everything going on? As Ronnie mentioned before, this whole thing that's happening right now is not going to go away, and it shouldn't, because it's been simmering for 400 years. Yeah. It's been sitting there stewing, and
it hasn't. The pressure plug hasn't been released in this country for 50 years. So the Civil Rights Act passes, and there's this collective. There's still a lot of upheaval, but we haven't seen this kind of coordinated movement. And here's the thing: if you're a 60-year-old black woman or man in this country, you were born into a country where your right to vote was not guaranteed.
Right. Yeah, and that wasn't that long ago.
No, it's not that long ago.
And I don't want to take away from everything that's happening right now, and I don't want to compare these things like they're equals. But one of the best illustrations that we have when we look at what's happening now and our involvement in it is the Holocaust, because we have people saying the Holocaust wasn't that long ago. Civil rights weren't very long ago either. We have these people being led to the slaughterhouse, and many folk saying, if I were alive then, I wouldn't have allowed that to happen. Well, here's your opportunity.
Yeah. It's an
and now people aren't being led.
Right.
Like I said, I don't want to compare that, but we're in a
there-
situation that is
few
have a
generations
chance
few
act.
generations get an opportunity to a moment of reckoning. Few
Yeah.
generations get that opportunity, and we're in one of those times now.
Yeah.
Let's see what
I'm
Craig
going
said.
to show you guys this video.
Okay, this is not the way things are supposed to be. We need to be on the forefront of altering things. The church has done so much in terms of the water crisis, so much in terms of the ended movement and sex trafficking, and 345 years, 89 years of slavery, 89 years of Jim Crow, and the church has said, well, it's over. What's our role here? When, in fact, this is one of the most beautiful opportunities for the church to become the hands and feet of doing something profound in society and in culture.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I okay, to put a personal point on it. I was at the Unity March Sunday afternoon in Grayton Beach. Jalen Jones is a local young man who is a good man and puts faith first in his life. He's been the organizing force for the, and he calls it a Unity March, but then one in Defuniak and then one at Grayton Beach. And he reached out to me. And he said, would you come and say the benediction at the end? And that's quite a honor. I was honored that he would do that. And so I went, and my prayer turned into a little bit of a sermon for a few seconds there, because again, we preacher types, we got to tell people what we know. And there was even an incident there where there was a man with a Confederate flag, and he had his great grandfather's boots that he had worn in the war, and Jalen intentionally engaged him in a conversation, and it was very good, very peaceful, and there was at no point any name calling or so much of what you see on mainstream media in big cities, violence and none of that. So the feedback I've gotten since then has been largely positive, but there's been some negative. And the question is always, how can you go over there and stand with those people, which is always an interesting phrase, those people.
Yeah.
When there are people there that want to abolish the police, and there are people there that hate cops, and there are people there that do this, and do this. And I am sensitive to that. I am trying to find my way in this. And I do know that there is rampant injustice that has to be corrected. And sometimes when you join in to help, there are those that are in that same group that you would never affirm their beliefs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've just begun to answer some folks like this. If I can't be with a group of people because there are some elements within that group of people that I cannot endorse, I'll have to stop being a Christian. Because there's plenty within the church.
Right.
There are plenty of, and anybody, anybody that's a thinking Christian sees that. There are other people within our tribe of Christians that say they're Christians, and we scratch our heads. and say, what? You know, I'm not that kind of Christian, or I would, you know, how can you call yourself a Christian and do X, 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 and X? Well, we would radically disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean we give up on our faith. We stay engaged, even when the umbrella over our faith has some people under that umbrella that we just can't quite get.
Right. It's you know, sort of like you aren't, when you go to a gas station, right, and you go in and you get yourself a drink, you aren't endorsing the dirty magazines on the shelf.
No.
You aren't endorsing the scratch tickets, you know, because that leads to gambling and all that sort. It's the very same token.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
I've had that struggle, Garrett, where I've really at times in my faith and in subset of faith that I needed things to be so pure and right, and I struggle with that because there's a piece of me that still wants that, but I understand that you can leave your fundamentalism behind. But if all you're still doing is demanding this purity of some sort, it's the same game. You're still being a fundamentalist about, you know, I can only be with people that are in this kind of condition or this category. And it's difficult because there's tension and there's discomfort and there are hard conversations. And I just don't think there's any way to avoid those. We just and we might pull a Louis Giglio. We might really step in it.
Yeah.
Trying
Yeah.
to do a good thing and just
Yeah. I mean,
we might.
Yeah. You know, essentially, he's trying to get people to understand that, hey, we might be blinded by privilege. And he used the word blessing, but you know the point still kind of remains the same, that we might still be blinded by the fact that we have it so good we can't see outside of our own, own, parameters.
Right.
We don't see what's on the periphery. We don't see what's happening, all around. And
Yeah, because celebrity pastors are not the only ones who live in a bubble.
right. Yep. Much of the church.
Much of the church. I'm not talking about simple faith. Specifically, the church.
Yep.
Much broader. We often live inside of a cultural bubble, and Billy Graham said for years, up till his death, that the most segregated hour in the United States every week is at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings.
Yep.
And he was right, In some larger cities, you see more integration of diverse races and ethnicities in churches, but you don't see that by and large across the board.
I can't remember if you said this, if it was in Jesus Tribe or somewhere else, but it's interesting that the most segregated time is on Sunday morning, but Sunday afternoon when football's on, you get all these people packed into the stadium. Why can't the church be like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just think about what you've just said.
I did. I said it.
I love that analogy because there's rarely overt racism at a ball game.
You'll have racists there, and they'll say some stupid stuff.
You'll have racists there, but by and large, it's not there. There is a unifying principle that goes beyond things.
Mm-hmm.
And something Jalen has helped me with, he said, people say, well, I'm colorblind. I don't see color.
Right.
He said, stop that.
Yeah.
He said that to me personally. Don't use that phrase. And I said, help me understand. And he said, because you need to see the diversity. You need to see the beauty. You need to value that. And the minute you say, well, I'm colorblind, I don't see color, that you are generalizing everyone.
Right.
Rather than seeing them as unique people of God.
Yeah, and when you're watching a football game and you have a young person there who's beginning to learn and understand the game for the first time, and they go, "Who are you cheering for?" You go, "The team in red or the team in blue," or you know, it's not about being colorblind. It's about acknowledging
Right.
and embracing the differences in the cultural. I have to share this with you. I don't know if I shared this with you or not. I might have, but I got a message on Facebook a couple weeks ago, and it was after George Floyd's death, and that's really that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
It really kind of pushed things moving forward in the midst of all these other things happening too.
Sure.
But I just said, I stand in solidarity with people of color. That Black lives do matter. And I had someone I hadn't talked to in years and years message me and start asking questions like, do you think privilege is real? Do you think it exists? And I went on this like hour and a half conversation on Facebook, which is never a good idea. But fortunately, it was a good opportunity to share what I've learned over the past few years in this unveiling of this whole racial reconciliation thing. It wasn't until a few years ago that I was awakened to this, that this is a real ongoing issue, and I started having conversations. Well, anyway, I unpacked all this on in an hour and a half long conversation, but that's an example of what's happening in the church and amongst a lot of really good people. Is I don't think privilege exists, and that's where Lecrae, I think he even says this in later on in that video. It's like an hour and 10-minute long video where he says, just you being able to say I don't think privilege exists is a privilege in and of itself, because it means you're not aware of really what's happening.
Right.
You're so, and this isn't a diss, but you're so ignorant and blinded by what's happening, what's going on, and what's been going on for generations and generations.
Here's a comment that's posting. It's from he comments and he always says no one ever reads my comments. It's from Tim Riles.
Hey Tim,
Hey,
I hope
Tim.
your fingers are good.
Tim, by the way, folks, Tim has a little spec house he's been working on. It's been his job this year, building it out to try to sell it. And he's his own contractor, and he's very handy with that sort of stuff. Handy. However, he did nail with a nail gun these two fingers together this week. I saw it with my own eyes. Very disgusting. But he says the conversation on difficult topics will always offend the other party at first. The point is to continue to talk.
Tim with a bucket of wisdom.
And Bobby follows it up by saying the best advice is for us white folks to just listen.
Yes.
And both of those conversations are both those comments are absolutely true. These are hard conversations, and I think if we can truly listen without being prepared to be offended, it'll go a long way. And when someone says even Black Lives Matter, they're not saying no other life matters.
Right.
Right. Jalen and I were talking about that very subject as well, and he said, Pastor, it's just like that story of the lost sheep. There are 99 sheep that are fine. There's the one that's not fine, and that sheep matters. And he says, if the herd all says all sheep matter, well, we know all sheep matter. What about the one that's lost?
The one that he goes after.
The one that has to be pursued for the sake of reconciliation. And I'm like, yeah, you're preaching now. You're preaching now, Jalen. I'm listening.
You know what story sticks out in my mind? It's one of your favorite stories. The one that sticks out in my mind that is like a perfect illustration of this is the Good Samaritan. It's like who are we? Who are we in the story?
Yeah.
You know, because it's one thing. That's the beauty of Jesus' teachings. It's one thing to read these and study them and go, oh, you know, this is what it means. This is how we can apply it. It's very applicable right now.
Oh, this is the moment. This is the
Like,
moment.
Are we the Levite? Are we the priest?
Yeah,
Are the ones
'cause-
going, oh, I can't. Oh.
Because out of our religious obligations, because the reason those guys pass by on the other side is that to touch a body with an open wound or a dead body is to become ceremonially unclean.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, they're saying, I can't get my hands dirty, and it's my religious conviction, and that's why they kept going. And it's not just that they they didn't act for the benefit of someone else; they intentionally avoided.
Yeah,
And that's the thing that the church no longer has the luxury of.
absolutely.
You cannot intentionally avoid these issues. And I've had this criticism as well. And if you're listening and you're one of the critics, I'm sorry. The criticism of, well, we just need to get back to just preaching about Jesus. Well, that's what all of this is about.
Well, yeah. What do you think we're doing?
You know, it's as you do unto the least of these my brothers and sisters, you've done it as unto me. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. Love thy neighbor as you love yourself. All of that. The very loving moral ethic of Jesus, who whenever you see him throwing a party, everybody is invited.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody.
And the beauty of the context of Jesus and his teachings and his reaching out to people. He's a person of color. He's a person of race, and he's reaching people of a different race.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like hopefully this doesn't go over everyone's head.
No.
But this Jesus is living in the midst of this. And so when we look to the example of how are we supposed to engage in this conversation or in this movement, whatever is happening, we were just downstairs right before we had some ribs and red beans and rice. It just
Good ribs.
I asked Ronnie, and obviously the answer is pretty obvious, but where is this going to land with the church? And the obvious answer is we have no idea.
No idea.
But we need to err on the side of being with it and trying to figure out what our role is and all this. And there's no greater person to look than Jesus, because he's in the middle of essentially what we're experiencing right now.
And again, the church has not had this sort of I can say a lot about this, but the church hasn't had this kind of gut check since the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And it need not be forgotten that I'll recommend this to folks. If you're watching this right now, you can go online, you can go to the Smithsonian, you can go to the King Center, read Letter from a Birmingham Jail by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. when he was incarcerated there, leading protest boycotts in Birmingham, Bull Connor and that whole thing. But the letter from Birmingham Jail was directed to a group of pastors in Birmingham that were calling Martin Luther King to account because they felt he was being too provocative, too meddling, and too much of an extremist for the time, that he should be more patient, that he should be nice, that he should not inflame the passions. And if I've been to the mountaintop speech, his last speech is, in my mind, the finest piece of American oratory ever produced in Northern America. If that's true in this case, then Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail is as sterling an example of a measured response to the church that I have ever read in my life on the issue of race in North America. And it's 55, 60 years old now, and it will stand. It is a it is a masterpiece. And it's in that letter where he says, "You accuse me of being an extremist. Let us not forget that 3 men were crucified on Calvary's hill that day. 2 were extremists for crime and despair. 1 was an extremist for love."
Mm-hmm.
And it is not a matter of being an extremist, but what kind of extremist are you going to be? It's a masterpiece. It's an absolute masterpiece, and it helps me. I revisit that letter from time to time. I've written about it, preached about it, and it really helps ground me in times like these. To know that whether you're Ronnie McBrayer or Garrett McHugh or Louis Giglio, you're not going to get it right every time.
Right.
But are you getting up off the canvas and staying in the game and trying out of the compulsion of love to seize the moment of these times and say, I want to be on the side of love. I want to be on the side of Christ opening, extending his heart, of looking for that lost sheep, of welcoming that lost sheep. And as I think about Jalen's words, I just wonder too, if the prodigal comes home later in that chapter and the father says to the older son, your brother has returned and we're throwing a party. If the older brother basically says all brothers matter.
Right.
Yeah, they do. But the son who was lost has now been found.
Right.
And we're going to celebrate that fact.
So we have just a few minutes left. For the individual that might just, I don't know, maybe might be waking up to this for the first time, that might be realizing, you know what, like I do sense this obligation to do something in light of my contextual upbringing, in light of my history, all these different things, and they all play a role in who we are and whatnot. But they've sheltered me from this storm that's happening, that's been brewing. So for the person that might be waking up right now for the first time to this, what advice would you have for them?
I would say that if you're just waking up to it, chances are that you don't, and this is not a judgment, it's just how it is, that you probably don't have that many friends of color. Don't go out and make a friend. I love black people. I got a black friend. That's not what I'm saying.
Right. Don't go out and adopt a black friend.
Right. Don't do that. Don't do that. But for example, Jalen and I met in the turmoil of trying to figure out that very question you just asked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so in my conversations with that young man, and I'm old enough to be his father, as I said to him, standing on a football field in Defuniak Springs, Jalen, I can be here for you, but what would be helpful is if you were me, what should I be doing? He's the young black man.
Yeah.
And I want to be an ally and a friend, but I can't lead in that regard. But I can learn. And the reason I can't lead is that I don't have the vernacular for it yet. I don't have my sea legs for it yet. And I've raised a black son.
Mm-hmm.
But still, you know, till the day he died, my grandfather still called the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression. You know, I mean, the Confederacy is deep in my family. And that's why I don't have any patience for it's heritage, not hate. I know all about that. You know, I am literally a son of the Confederacy. My middle name, I am named after Robert E. Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay? So I know all that stuff. And as hard as it is for someone who's a 50-year-old man and, you know,
Nearing 50.
almost 50,
Almost
got
50.
degrees on the wall, and, again, used to being the expert, to look a 25, 30-year-old kid in the eyes and say, how can I help?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I would start there. Instead of, I'm going to have this plan, how can I help? And listen. And there'll be some things you're told that you can do. And there'll be some things you're told that will challenge you. Like, I don't know if I can do that. And just being at that Unity March with him this weekend, I was walking down the sidewalk, watching him, listening to him, and I was thinking in my mind, how much courage did it take to do this in 1964?
Oh, man. Yeah.
So it's difficult, but there's been some folks who have broke the ground before us.
Mm-hmm.
That have, and so there are historic examples to help too. Clergy from all races and denominations, and churches from all races and denominations, were instrumental in the civil rights movement. It was rooted in the church, and I've quoted him for years. And I think Bobby did a little shout out to me about him recently. Clarence Jordan, who started Koinonia Farms and eventually was helped launch what would become Habitat for Humanity. Started that farm for the poor. I'm going back to Georgia to do something for the poor, he said when he was handed his PhD in Greek literature from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. I'm going back to Georgia to do something for the poor. And when he got to Georgia, he realized that the poorest of the poor were black. And he started working on integration in 1955, 10 years ahead of the real peak, as a white man. But he came to learn and to listen and to be an ally. And that's where it has to begin.
Right.
Learn, listen, be an ally.
Absolutely.
Okay, we better run.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks.
For
Thanks for participating, all the
indulging.
comments and the questions, everything. I appreciate it so much.
Yeah. We'll
We're
see
going to
you
go
guys-
finish the ribs.
There's a little bit left. There's not much.
Bye, guys. See you Sunday.
Was a time of the preacher when a story begun. The choice of a woman and the love of a man, and how he loved her so dearly. He went out of his mind. Well, she left him